Over the past decade, the New York Times has developed a bit of a beat on presidential candidates and their so-called butlers. The series started in 2004 when the Times looked at one of John Kerry's staffers in a piece headlined "Part Butler and Part Buddy, Aide Keeps Kerry Running." The profile told the story of Marvin Nicholson Jr., the man ready with an uncapped bottle of water whenever Mr. Kerry's throat runs dry. Over a decade later, the paper came out with an eye-opening profile of Donald Trump's butler at his Mar-a-Lago estate. Although we should be more specific, Anthony Seconal resigned as butler in 2009 and now functions, according to the New York Times, as, quote, a kind of unofficial historian at Mar-a-Lago. The 74-year-old told the paper he had worked for Trump for nearly 30 years. And he shared several interesting tidbits, like how the staff came to view Trump's choice of hats as a mood ring of sorts. If the cap was white, the boss was in a good mood. If it was red, it was best to stay away. The piece describes how, over the decades, Senecal had grown close to the Trump family, the man who understands Mr. Trump's sleeping patterns and how he likes his steak well done. That profile certainly shows you one side of the man. But if you were Facebook friends with Trump's butler, you were treated to another side. And that's now a problem for the presumptive nominee. Do not go anywhere. We will bring you that after this break. Okay, so today we learned that 74-year-old Anthony Senecal, the man previously known to the world as the former butler and affable house historian of Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, who says he's worked with Trump for nearly 30 years, also kept a Facebook page filled with hateful and threatening statements about President Obama. Mother Jones, who first broke the story, revealed dozens and dozens of unbelievably disturbing quotes written by Anthony Senecal. Two such comments from May 23, 2015, less than a month before Trump declared his candidacy, read, quote, "Joseph, I hate to say it again, but I feel it is time for the second American Revolution. The only way we will change this crooked government is to bleep it. This might be the time with this Kenyan fraud in power." Another one, "Not me, Terry. With the last breath I will help rid America of the scum infested in its government. And if that means dragging that bleepless bleep head from the White Mosque and hanging his scrawny bleep from the portico, count me in." Today, NBC News spoke to Senecal, and when asked on the record with a reporter about issues he has with President Obama that led him to say the military should take him out, he restated his explicit threat.
There's more than some issues with him. He's a damn traitor. 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 Period. That's the way I feel.
And so you think that that's, I guess, what should be done with traitors?
I think he ought to be hung. I think he should be hung. I think he should be hung next to Hillary Clinton, and I think it should be public. I think it should be televised. I think it ought to be done from the portico of the White Mosque. It used to be the White House.
Senecal then went on to say that we should bomb cities like Detroit and Milwaukee, which have been, quote, totally disgraced by Muslims.
I actually think that we should designate those as nuclear bomb sites.
What do you mean?
We need to bomb them out.
Even though they're in the U.S.?
I could care less if they're in the U.S. I don't want them in the U.S.
Right.
They don't belong here. They belong in the sand dunes where they came from.
Senecal noted to NBC News that he had not shared his views on President Obama with Trump. Today, the Trump campaign said in a statement he does not work at Mar-a-Lago, hasn't in many years. We totally disavow and condemn these horrible statements. We should point out that Senecal was interviewed and photographed by the New York Times and NBC News at the Mar-a-Lago estate earlier this year. The Secret Service, meanwhile, put out a statement saying the U.S. Secret Service is aware of this matter and will conduct the appropriate investigation. Joining me now is David Corn, MSNBC political analyst, Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones, where he broke the story of Trump's one-time butler's threatening Facebook message about the president. Not a sentence I was expecting to utter. How did this come about? Who tipped you off? How did you find this?
I have somebody who basically stumbled across one of his posts on Facebook and sent it to me and said, you should look further into this. And I did. I spent more hours than I care to admit scrolling back through Tony Senecal's timeline yesterday and found a host of remarks. The first one I was tipped off to was the recent one in which he said the military in Obama's first term should have taken Obama out and shot him as an enemy agent. And as I went back through his timeline, I found other remarks in which he called for the president to be killed, and lots of other extreme, hateful remarks about Obama, his wife, Hillary Clinton, and even Republican leaders. A lot of remarks that some people consider racist and really a host of statements that are anti-Muslim. You know, I wish I could recite some of them for you. They are in the piece. People can read them at motherjones.com.
Yes.
But I don't want to get in trouble here with standards and practices.
Well, so who cares, right? I mean, that's the question here. People have associates or employees. I mean,
right.
If this was a guy who was a caddy at one of Trump's golf courses, you know, who knows what there's all sorts of people who have all sorts of politics. Why do you think this is a story?
Well, he is at this moment the in-house historian at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, Hope Hicks and others have said he has nothing to do with them, but he claims, and this was in the New York Times story that came out a couple of months ago, and it wasn't contradicted, that when he gave up his duties as Butler in 2009, actually, as he told me, he wanted to resign at the time, and Donald Trump said, no, don't resign, stop acting as Butler and be our in-house historian. And he tells me that he still works at Mar-a-Lago. He's not on the payroll, but he conducts tours there, and he's paid by the people who go on the tours for that activity. So in some ways, he's still a contractor for Trump at the estate. And so that's kind of important. And I think it's just, interesting to note the type of support and the type of people that Donald Trump surrounds himself with, or probably in a more psychological sense, Chris, the type of activity and sentiment that he seems to be enabling. He's really letting people come forward with their full resentments and hatreds, and they're not feeling shy about voicing them in the aftermath of Donald Trump's announcement.
Well, I will say this, Mr. Senecal, to his credit, said those statements on the record and owned them. So you have them there. David Corn, thanks so much for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris.
Up next.
Breaking news at this hour, the Trump campaign disavowing the presumptive nominee's former butler who says he wants President Obama to be killed. This is a man who worked for Donald Trump for nearly 3 decades. And in a Facebook post, you see him there with Mr. Trump, Anthony Senecal wrote, in part, quote, Obama should have been taken out by our military and shot as an enemy agent in his first term. He then continued to say, actually, that wasn't how he should be killed. He got into more detail. Jeremy Diamond is out front. And Jeremy, you actually spoke to Anthony Senecal today, that former butler. He doubled down on his comments, telling you that the president should be hanged.
That's right, Aaron. Yeah, I spoke with Anthony Senecal today. He said that the last time he saw Donald Trump was about a month ago. And then yesterday on Facebook, he wrote this Facebook post where he essentially calls for President Obama to be killed. I reached him today and he immediately confirmed that he wrote the post, but he had one quick clarification, and that was the way in which he said President Barack Obama should be killed. And this is the quote. He said to me, I'd prefer he'd be hung from the portico of the White House, or as I call it, the White Mosque. He continues, does it sound like I'm nuts? Because I'm not. I've just gotten fed up with him. And that was just one of the comments that Senecal said that are raising some eyebrows today. He also referred to Muslims repeatedly as muzzies in his conversation with me. Of course, the Trump campaign is now coming out and disavowing that, which is pretty notable given the Trump campaign's past of hesitating in terms of disavowing certain hate groups and hateful comments from their supporters. Aaron?
All right, Jeremy, thank you very much. Incredible having that opportunity for that quote-unquote clarification. Out front now, Hillary Clinton supporter Maria Cardona. Her firm currently does work for a pro-Clinton super PAC. Barry Bennett is back with me along with Mark Preston. Barry, you were shaking your head along with everybody else. I mean, Anthony Senecal wasn't just the butler. He was Trump's in-house historian. He worked for him for nearly 30 years. According to the New York Times, when he tried to retire back in 2009, Trump personally intervened, got him to stay on longer. He knew him well.
Yeah, he hasn't worked for him in a couple of years, or several years. But as soon as they found out about it, Mr. Trump wanted to completely disavow himself of any of this. He has nothing to do with the campaign, nothing to do with the Trump Organization today. He did used to work there. He was a trusted person for a while, but what he said was disgusting. and we completely disavow it.
Is that enough, Maria?
Well, clearly, I'm glad to hear that he did it immediately and he didn't hesitate, which I think is what people were worried about back when, the KKK group, et cetera. So I don't think this will be an issue, but I do think it will remind voters of all of the other hateful comments that Trump has made, and will sort of put it in that bucket of, this is not somebody who really either understands what America looks like today, is going to go after those voters that they need, that a Republican candidate will need to get to the White House, additional demographics, women, minorities, Hispanics, African Americans, et cetera. So I think it comes at an inopportune time for them, but I'm glad he disavowed it.
Okay, this, though, is not the first time Trump, you raised, has had an issue with white supremacist types of comments, as we know, Mark, the KKK. White nationalist super PAC had done some robocalls for Trump, in which they said, let me quote it, the robocall said, "We don't need Muslims, we need smart, well-educated white people who will assimilate to our culture, vote Trump." I asked Donald Trump about this in an interview, and here's exactly how he answered. Mr. Trump, when you hear that, does that shock you? Do you denounce that?
Nothing in this country shocks me. I would disavow it, but nothing in this country shocks me. People are angry. They're angry at what's going on. They're angry at the border. They're angry at the crime. So I would disavow that, but I will tell you, people are extremely angry.
People are extremely angry, but to be clear, when he says we need smart, well-educated white people to assimilate to our culture, vote Trump, you're saying you disavow that, you do denounce that.
Well, you just heard me. I said it. How many times do you want me to say it?
Okay. You now have someone very close to him posting these horrific things on Facebook. I mean, there's no other word to describe it. The campaign is coming out and using the word disavow, which is obviously the same word Trump used to me. So it's very clear there was a conversation about that, it seems to me, from my interpretation of it. But is that enough that the campaign comes out? Is it smart or not smart of him to not personally say anything?
Here's a couple things. One is, this is a situation in a campaign where an outside force is now going to control your message, perhaps for the next 12 hours, maybe for the next 24 hours, okay? Second thing is I'm not quite sure Donald Trump, when these past incidents occurred, really paid attention to what was saying. And that may sound like a defense of Donald Trump, and I don't mean to defend him or to attack him, but I really don't think that Donald Trump listens intently enough to know what is really going on. And that's why clearly in that interview, when you said it to him over and over and over again, he kind of listened to half of it and spun out how people are angry. And I just think, listen, it was smart for him at this point to disavow him immediately and to cut him loose. I'm sure when he's out in his next press briefing or what have you, he'll be asked about it and he'll cut this guy loose.
Barry.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the past, and I will take part of the blame myself, because, we didn't get it to him fast enough. Right? I mean, we can't monitor the world's Twitter feeds. We're a pretty small organization compared to presidential races at this point. We're getting a lot bigger. But we need to do a better job of finding things fast and getting it to him fast so that he can respond as fast as he can. Now, this is completely disgusting. I mean, and
you're talking about Anthony Seneca, the butler.
I come from I have a mixed race family, and that makes me sick.
The
I hear
robocall.
that stuff. But the sin that we committed was not acting fast enough, and we should have done faster, and we will.
But these stories keep coming out. There was a story 2 days ago about how there's a delegate in California that was elected, a Donald Trump delegate, who was a white supremacist, a white nationalist. And today, I thought it was very interesting. Paul Ryan's, his press conference, he had a line in there where it said, he talked about all of the possible unity, where he said, yes, Donald Trump is bringing in all of these new voters, but he's clearly worried about not subtracting voters. That spoke volumes to me, because that is exactly what Donald Trump is doing. He is subtracting millions of voters, the kinds of voters that in 2012 the RNC put out a whole report saying that they needed more of, and they're doing
Barry,
completely the opposite.
That is a criticism that he's gotten on this, that the reason that he has hesitated is because he doesn't want to alienate any possible voters, no matter who they might be.
But I would argue that it's not a hesitation, it's just an organizational flaw on our part not to get him to him fast enough. Now, there's no party has a market on hate. I mean, you can look at my Twitter feed and you can find plenty of hate from people who are not going to vote for Donald Trump. And the American public is boiling over with this stuff. I mean, it's kind of sickening. I wouldn't want my kids to read what people tweet me about. But, as a society, we've got to get better. We've got to get beyond this. But as a campaign, we have to react much faster.
All right, so are people, bottom line, are people going to buy this?
I think so. And just to put a cap on it, again, Donald Trump is now the presumptive Republican nominee. He's running for president. You've got to be out in front of this. Or otherwise, it is going to be a question of, are you accepting of it? Are you fostering it? Are you allowing it to happen?
All right,
Absolutely.
thanks to all. And tonight, the fight on for campaign cash. Trump and Clinton sending their teams to court donors.